Hello, you're through to Books Boys. You got Dean on the line. Who's calling?
It is George Paxinos from Australia.
Ah, George, fantastic. And such a great coincidence you would call in right when we were chatting about your book. How are you today?
Fine. Better for speaking with you.
Ah, thank you so much. Fantastic. And I'm better for having read your book. I loved it. I've had it on my shelf for a couple of months. And first of all, it's got this lovely red cover, which I just adore. The color is very, very deep, very vibrant. I was really looking forward to reading it. They always say don't judge a book by its cover, but this cover really made me want to read it. So I had to delay for a couple of months, and I was very sad. But I'm so glad that I was able to get around to reading it this month. So thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Now, you are potentially, it's very interesting. We interview a lot of authors and a lot of first-time authors as well. And your situation is a little bit unique because this is your first novel, but it's by far not your first book. I mean, according to this, you've published 57 scientific books. So what made you want to write a novel at this point?
Yes, it was failure leading to fiction in my case.
Okay.
I was active as a volunteer, joining groups, establishing some myself in environmental action,
Mm-hmm.
and failed in everything I tried. And I thought if only I could write a novel and take the reader with me and work on upstream of behavior, not trying to stop someone from cutting a forest, but
Mm-hmm.
making them want to preserve the forest. That is, work at attitude upstream of behavior. But I couldn't get to the vehicle, the idea, until one moment the thought came to mind of having a novel that asks the question, what would someone with the genetic endowment of Christ do if born today? Would he join Wall Street or street protests? And
Mm-hmm.
the plot is that an amateur archaeologist, professional geneticist, a lady from Australia, finds what she believes to be the remains of Christ, together with a well-preserved, including a well-preserved brain, from which she managed to extract DNA from one of the giant bat cells of the motor cortex,
Mm-hmm.
and has her own eggs harvested, removes the nucleus from inside the cell that contains the DNA, and inserts the DNA from what she thinks is the DNA of Christ. And accidentally, she divides the embryo in half, but that was on day 5 when she tried to check for the known culprits, diseases, and she now has actually two embryos because embryos, if divided, they both parts keep their cell division, and gives birth to one, then gives the other one to a surrogate in Argentina because she could not bear, for health reasons, the other one.
Yeah.
But the Argentinian lady absconds with the baby, and the two children, the two boys, are raised apart, unbeknownst to each other that the other exists or their genetic heritage. They meet in unfortunate circumstances in the Amazon, one constructing a hydroelectric dam for green energy, and the other one opposing
Yeah.
the construction of this dam. And they meet for a moment only to be lost forever, and the story starts from there.
It's interesting to me because the book sort of answers the age-old sort of nature versus nurture question by saying both, because we have these two boys who, in theory, are kind of twins based on the way they've been cloned, and they, as you say, they're in opposition in terms of their work, but they're actually in some ways quite similar people as well. So the environment they were raised in, of course, Jose, with the professor and teaching him about the environmentalism that put him on a certain path, and Christopher's on a different path, and he's trying to go into work and he ends up working for the company building the dam. But in some ways, I do think it's fair to say that they are quite similar. And Lorena discovers that Jose's girlfriend when she finally meets Christopher that you know there's a genetic element there, and that although they have a different background, they're very similar people. Is that fair to say?
You could have been a great psychologist. That's indeed what psychology says. I wrote fiction, but it is facts presented through
Mm.
fiction. My novel it deals with neuroscience and environmental science. And indeed, that's what the study of identical twins raised apart indicates. They are genetic predispositions, and this we can see, of course, in preference for sex, for homosexuality, as well as in diseases such as schizophrenia, depression. That
Oh, really?
if an identical twin one of the identical twins has schizophrenia, the probability that the other one will also have schizophrenia is 50%. That is, the burden is 50 times higher than the incidence of the population
Wow.
at large. Because if I have schizophrenia, the possibility of you having schizophrenia is 1%, what the
Mm.
population occurrence is. But if you are my identical twin and I have schizophrenia, the probability that you have it is 50 times higher. And yet it's not 100% because
Mm.
even there, the environment plays a
Still
significant
plays a
role, the
role.
remaining
Yeah.
50%.
And it's interesting that we start out the story with, as you mentioned, our the mother, I suppose, looking at this brain that they find intact, this brain of Christ, and she's able to do the work then and get the matter that they need and divide the nucleus and everything. And that's something that, of course, you would be aware of, having named 94 nuclei. So it says here you're the most in history, most brain parts named in history. That's a particular accomplishment that I felt should be mentioned in the interview.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. It's the most pleasant thing for us if we identify something that was not known to science before.
Yeah.
And then in the case of identifying brain regions, you also get a chance to name them.
Hmm. And that's fantastic. Let me ask you something then about the writing. So you're not planning on writing another novel, isn't it? This is a one-time thing, is that right?
I have written what I wanted to say, and given the time it took me to do the first one, to be specific, I was writing it yeah, before submission at a cafe, and a friend stopped by and asked me how the book is going, the usual question. And I said, 21 years and I'm still not finished. And she said, my cousin's novel was published posthumously. I said, you are giving me hope. Uh, I had difficulty finding a publisher. When I approached someone, he said, what is this book about? I said, it's a travel diary in 4 continents. It asks the question of what would someone with the genetic endowment of Christ do if he was born today. It deals with ethics, with
Yeah.
religion, with the environment. It is principally about the environment. And he said, and on what shelf would I place it? And until that moment, I was convinced of Woody Allen's dictum. If you are a bisexual, you double your chances for a rendezvous on a Saturday night.
Yeah,
Uh,
you would hope you double your chances, but sometimes when it comes to releasing things like books and other, films, whatever, they want to categorize it. They want to put it into a box and, music genre or whatever it is. And if they can't do that, they think it won't be, easily marketable or something like that. I've heard other stories like that before. But look, you got it published. It's not posthumous. It's done, and it's fantastic. So you finished it after 2 decades of hard work, and we're better for it. And you're right, it does cover a lot of topics. We have, of course, this fantastic idea of what if we use the DNA of Christ? But it's interesting because they're not necessarily believers in Christianity. It's more an admiration for Christ as a man, from what I understand, and wanting to see, how that would play out in the modern world. Is that fair?
Right, Dean. Only a non-believer would conceive the idea of doing this.
Yeah, of course.
But my Christian friends, uh, indeed, some priests who read the work, they liked it. They
Okay.
think that the issue is, I hope you would agree, that issue is treated sensitively, issues related to Christ and religion. Well, my reason of picking Christ is that because I could have picked another philosopher, was that he was a major moral philosopher, uh, certainly perhaps the most known, and the early Christians constructed a society based on mutual help and love,
Mm.
which what today we need is a reset of
Yeah.
religion, science, and culture to produce a sustainable society. So I thought of the early Christians, their success in revolutionizing the culture. Uh, that what you need today is a broad effort. This you have to
Mm.
firstly, and religion, of course, at the moment is principally an impediment to constructing a sustainable society. And I'm referring to
Arguably so,
what you
yeah.
might have noticed in the book, the issue of overpopulation.
Yes.
The Catholic Church would say that HIV is evil, but not as evil as prophylactics that may prevent you from getting HIV and assist you in planning your family. So you have the paradox of 80 million people being born unwanted every year on the
Yeah.
planet, and the dissemination of birth control is inhibited by the churches. So uh, the churches have to, or religions in general, religions have to get out of the bedroom of people.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair. I would be totally with you on that. I do have one point though. We sort of work on the assumption that okay, we might not be believers, we might not be a Christian or Catholic, but we're working on the assumption that Jesus as a man, as a philosopher, as you call him, would be a good person. Now, I, for one, would like to see this kind of experiment done on the DNA of Socrates. That's my favorite philosopher, but. It is interesting because you ask, well, what would someone with Jesus DNA be doing? Would they be part of the protests, part of the activists, the environmentalists, or would they be the big company guy? And I think the book explores both options, but I would put my money on the activist. And you've only got to read something like Zealot by Reza Aslan to see that the historical character of Jesus was a bit more anti-institutional or a bit of a he was there was a real crime there, I suppose, that he was convicted of theoretically. But yeah, I definitely think he would be on the side of the rebels, the
Yeah,
environmentalists.
well, that's right. And as you pointed out, you saw common traits in both. And indeed, constructing a dam for green energy is a pro-environmental stand. But it would be a good thought experiment to consider other philosophers, and as you mentioned, Socrates, My upbringing, we are part of our environment, or as Lord Denison said, I am part of all that I have met.
Mm,
And my background was that I was raised in Christianity, so I knew something about that.
sure. There's a very nice line, that could have really come from any philosopher in the book, page 144, I believe it is. It's a nice moral teaching. I don't want to give too many spoilers, but basically there's an incident with someone and they consider phoning the police and they say, well, he's a victim too. And Jose says this fantastic line, let me just read it. If we didn't know better, we would be like him. And if he knew what we knew, he would be with us. And I love that line. I think that's fantastic.
And in fact, you picked perhaps the best line. I hope the readers will find some more lines in there next their time. But yeah, that is where the connection with the neuropsychological thinking of Jesus comes.
Hmm.
He himself on the cross said, "Forgive them, for they don't know what they are doing." This is a modern neuroscience position that there is no freedom, there's no free will. We are the product of our genes and our environment. Of course, the environmental influence is far greater for most behaviors. Yeah, in that way, Jesus is a neuroscientist in saying that. And yeah, you will see that one of the twins that has that opportunity also behaves in a similar way of forgiving the person who did the greatest injustice to
Yeah.
him.
And we do see some other interesting things. And again, I don't want to give too many spoilers, and I'm not going to let the listeners know, do the brothers meet, and if so, what happens. But we do have some interesting things like Lorena ends up in jail at one point. We also see an ex-girlfriend of Che Guevara, who says, well, don't be like him. He was a bit too aggressive and, didn't go down the right route. So there's a lot of talking points and a lot of interesting things in the book, and I highly recommend it. But the one thing I want to ask you about is I really feel for Michael, because all this time he's been in love with Evelyn and she's chosen to have children via this route. She's never really told him that she loves him. He's never really he's sort of unofficially her partner. And even with Christopher, he's kind of unofficially his dad, but again, Christopher never really calls him dad and I love you, dad, and this kind of thing. I really feel bad because he sticks around and he's a good guy and he sticks with them, but he's not really he doesn't seem to get any thanks for it or any sort of praise for it or any love for it really.
Yeah, yes, you are right. The character, Michael's character, in some ways, of course, Joseph's character of Joseph and Mary,
Of course.
and he himself gets. This is the issue, really, that neuroscience would tell you. You don't have the freedom to love or not to love someone.
Yeah.
And you see that, of course, in literature. Carmen says, L'amour, il n'y a jamais, jamais connu de loi. Love never knew the law. Uh, and you can see it in people. If I take the example from the 1960s, where homosexuality was considered something even illegal, and people wanted to abandon their homosexuality and subjected themselves even to brain surgery, some of them, not successfully, of course. But who would be doing that if they could simply switch
Yeah,
preferences?
of course.
So I think there is enough evidence on the domain of love that there is no freedom. And you can actually extend this. There's no freedom, in fact, in anything.
Well, yeah, I'm
We
a, I'm a determinist. I don't believe in free will at all. So
well, so we are preaching to a converted, but just for our audience, we are we are genes sculpted by the environment, much as Praxiteles sculpted Hermes out of a block of marble. So are we sculpted in the environment. And the book goes into this in dealing with identical twins. So that is that even if uh, as two artists would sculpt different statues from the same block of marble, different environments would sculpt different characters, even in identical twins.
Yeah.
And of course, this is what is shown. So Michael loved Evelyn, and in some ways, the book considers this: who is happier, Michael, who is next to the person he loves, or Evelyn, who
Mm.
cannot love? Uh, so in some
Yeah.
ways, he's
He's
privileged
happier, isn't
as
he?
he's privileged. He might be happier than Evelyn, who realizes too late that all along she loved this person.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a fair point. I feel bad for him, but maybe it's Evelyn that we should really feel bad for. I don't know. Um,
Well, in some ways, yes, this, a trauma early in her emotional life. A ghost love was killing all future ones.
hmm. I tried to, in my own head, write a little fairy tale ending. You know, Christopher calls Michael dad, and then they move together to Argentina, and they all live with Lorena, and everyone's all happy together. You know, but we didn't necessarily get that. So, so look, let me ask you one. Well, there's going to be two final questions. First of all, would you like to just tell people where they can get the book or plug your website or something like that?
Yeah, it's George Paxinos uh, dot com.au and for
I'll put a
Australia.
link. I'll put a link anyway.
Yeah, and booksellers like Amazon and the other ones have it. And if they write to me, they can find my email. I can guarantee you, Dean. It is. I'll send them an ebook or the ebook or the audiobook if they would like to exercise. Exercise is good
Yeah.
for retarding dementia.
Ah, okay,
So
good. So there we go. Do some exercise while listening to the audiobook. That's the way to do it.
yes, yes. I mean, my aim was to propagate some of these ideas of neuroscience and environmental science, and I'll be happy to
Hmm,
send it to them. Uh, yeah. And
fantastic.
anyway, by email is George. I'm sorry. The email is G as in George
Hmm.
dot Paxinos at Neura Neura dot edu.au.
Very generous offer. Thank you so much. I'm sure hopefully some people will take you up on that. I love how much of yourself, you know, presumably how much of yourself goes into this because it's, you know, yes, we have the scientific, the neuroscientific aspects, but we also have the environmental aspects, which is something that you've spent a lot of your own time on as well. So it's nice to see that you put a lot of yourself into the book and I can see why it took so long and why there won't be another. Um, but I'm going to ask you the final question that we ask everyone who calls into the show, and that is, I'm going to maybe catch you off guard, but if there's one book that already exists that you wish you had been the person to write, what would it be?
It was uh, uh, the um, Catch 22.
Ah, yes, fantastic. We reviewed that a few months back. Yeah, brilliant. Fantastic. Well, George, it's been great chatting to you. As I say, I love the book. Thank you so much, and enjoy
And
the rest of your day.
thank you for the opportunity, Dean, and may I wish to your listeners that their brain shrinks less than expected for their age.
Fantastic.